Imagine embarking on a journey where every night is a spectacle of beautiful shimmering lights across the sky. Welcome to the ultimate Northern Lights road trip itinerary through Finland, Sweden, and Norway. In this video, we're revealing everything you need to know to plan the adventure of a lifetime. From the best times to witness the Aurora Borealis, to the craziest places to stay, adventurous activities, and some of the most beautiful destinations we've ever visited, we've got you covered. We'll guide you through the must-visit destinations in Lapland, share tips from our past visits, and show you how to capture the perfect Northern Lights photos. Whether you're a seasoned traveler or planning your first Arctic expedition, this itinerary is designed to maximize your chances of experiencing the magic of the Northern Lights. So buckle up and get ready for an unforgettable journey across the Arctic Circle. Let's dive into the ultimate Northern Lights road trip itinerary. If you guys are new here, we are the Lover's Passport, and our goal is to help you plan the best itineraries around the entire world. We've traveled over 41 different countries, so if you love travel and you love adventure, make sure to give us a like and subscribe. And with that, let's go ahead and jump into this video. So first up, we're going to talk about how we plan this trip, things that we wish we would have known before we went. This was actually our second time visiting Lapland. The first time we visited, we had no idea what we were doing. We thought it'd be a ton of fun to go to Finland, stay in some of these Aurora cabins, and hope that we would see the Northern Lights, but we didn't know the best time to visit or anything about the area. So during our first visit, we visited for a full week and saw the Northern Lights 0 times, which was super unfortunate. So this trip, we went in with a lot more research. The first thing that we'd recommend doing is making sure you reach out to local guides. A lot of the guides in the area know the best spots to go. They typically are going to know where there's less light pollution and there's better locations depending on where the Northern Lights cameras are as well. And that's a lot of how we planned our trip. We looked at where all the different Aurora cameras were so we could kind of track it and see where the clouds were versus where the clouds were not and how strong the Aurora was. And that's how we planned our road trip from Finland through Sweden, up through Norway, and then back down to Finland. Now, when is the best time to go to Lapland to experience the Northern Lights? We would recommend visiting somewhere between September and April. Personally, we think the best time to go is during September and March. These 2 months have warmer temperatures. They also have less clouds. If you visit during the middle of winter in November, December, January, and February, typically there will be a lot more clouds, and that is your #1 problem when you are trying to see the Aurora. So we'd highly recommend planning your trip in March or September. Now, how long should you plan on visiting Lapland in order to do this itinerary? We would recommend around 2 weeks if you were going to do the full itinerary from Finland through Sweden and into Norway. But if you do not have enough PTO for that, or you can't just take off 2 weeks at a time, you can also break this road trip up into 3 different sections, one being Finland, one being Sweden, and another being Norway. So we will talk about that as we go into the video, but we would recommend having around 14 days to give everything justice and make sure you have enough time to hike, relax, and that you're not just driving the whole time. Because forewarning, there is a lot of driving in this itinerary.
Now, when it comes to planning your itinerary and where you're going to fly in and fly out of, you have quite a few different options. So the way that we personally have done it both times that we've come out to Lapland in the Arctic Circle is we chose Rovaniemi, Finland to fly in and out of, mainly for logistical reasons. If you're coming from the US, particularly in California, you don't have too many options in terms of ideal flight times that can be affordable. So this is a little bit more of an expensive flight depending on the time of year that you're going. And Rovaniemi has both times been around $600 to $800 round trip. And usually there's not a nonstop for us from Los Angeles to Rovaniemi. So we'll have to typically do a layover in Helsinki and then connect. Now, if you wanted to start along any part of this itinerary instead of Rovaniemi, you absolutely can do that as well. So the other airports I would recommend starting at and ending at, depending on how long your trip is Tromsø in Norway. That is one where you're going to find a lot more availability coming from the United States. If you're coming from Europe as well, that's a very popular international airport. If you're deciding to fly into Finland, some other ones besides Rovaniemi that you could choose are Ivalo or Kittilä. Both are other regional airports similar to the size of Rovaniemi, and you will probably also have to connect through Helsinki for those. The other Norway one I would recommend checking out is either Svolvær, which is more in the Lofoten Island area, or you could also fly into Bodo and take a ferry over and start your trip in the Lofoten Islands and go from there. So you have a ton of different options. We liked Finland because it was just logistically easier for us in terms of getting a rental car and where we were able to drive that rental car, because there are some limits and restrictions based on where you pick that up. Now, to save some money on these flights, we always recommend this service called Thrifty Traveler Premium. They send out daily flight drops on really amazing fare deals from airlines, as well as points and miles deals that are absolutely insane. We have a coupon code for them down below in the description for you guys. If you use the code passport10, you can get $10 off the service. And this has literally saved us thousands and thousands of dollars. We absolutely recommend it, as well as checking Skyscanner and Google Flights and setting up flight drop notifications so that you know if you're not on Thrifty Traveler when certain dates of flights drop in fare. And if you want to know more about this kind of points and miles strategy and fare drop strategy, definitely check out our points and miles freebie down below, where we go over all the basics for beginners who are looking to use their travel credit card points and miles for them to go on a pretty rad vacation. So that'll also be linked down below in the description. And with that naturally brings us into our next point, which is about driving around Lapland. Now, the one thing that you do want to know is it's not as scary as everyone makes it out to be driving in the winter around Lapland. Honestly, all of the roads are incredibly well maintained. Both times we've been out there, we rented a car from Hertz at the Rovaniemi airport and have had no issues. Honestly, their roads are way better preserved in Finland, Sweden, and Norway than they are in California, so it was a pleasant surprise. The one thing that you do want to note is about the parking laws in Rovaniemi. Make sure to look them up in advance. We did get a parking ticket because we didn't know about like certain areas where you could and could not park without paying. And when it's all in Finnish, it's a little hard and jumbling to figure out what costs money, what's free parking, and whatever. So just make sure to be aware of that. We download the parking apps. I think it's called Easy Park, and there's one other one that you can use too if you don't want to pay like a manual cash fee. That's the one that we would recommend doing, and just make sure you read every sign possible. This itinerary has a lot of driving, like a lot. So if you are not a big road trip person, then you're going to want to condense this into certain sections, like just the Lofoten Islands and Tromsø, or just Finland, or just Finland and Sweden. So like break it up into parts, because this one we were driving anywhere from 2 all the way up to 7 hours on certain days. So if that's not you, we won't be offended if you chop up this itinerary, because this was a lot. However, this was an absolutely insane way to see a lot of different places in a short amount of time. We will link the full blog itinerary down below as well, so it'll be easily available to you to put in the different driving times into Google Maps for you when you're doing your trip planning, but that is your forewarning. Now let's get into what to pack for your trip around Lapland and Scandinavia. Now, we actually have a full winter packing guide that we did for Finland last year, which I will link above here and down below in the description box. Depending on what time of the year you're going, like December to January is going to be much colder than February to the first week of April when you're going to chase the Aurora on this road trip. So it really depends. We actually had fairly warm weather both times around that we have gone, in both January and in March. And so we would recommend obviously bringing some base layers. We absolutely love the ones from like Kari Tra and Smart Wool. Those are probably our go-tos. Stephen loves his Patagonia. Then we would also recommend having a mid layer of sorts, whether that's a fleece layer, a merino wool layer, or some sort of like hand knitted wool sweaters. I loved bringing my colorful sweaters with me on this last trip to Norway and Finland and Sweden. And I will link all of our top recommendations in our LTK link down below if you guys want to shop our exact ones that we brought with us. That worked out really well. Once you have those 2 layers, you're going to want to go for your first like outer shell layer. Usually that's some sort of puffy jacket or some sort of thicker jacket. We would also recommend bringing a rain jacket in the event that it does rain. We luckily didn't have that while we were there, but it does happen and it's good to be prepared. That kind of goes hand in hand with like a windbreaker, but we didn't really need that too much. Lots of accessories like mittens, gloves, beanies, warm socks, hand warmers. Electric hand warmers are things we love to travel with because they're rechargeable and less wasteful. So we will have all of those different things linked down in the description box below for you. Another thing too is making sure you have like good snow pants, good snow boots. Make sure your feet aren't getting cold. We always recommend having that merino wool socks because they are extremely warm.
So that's what you need to know before you go. Now let's jump into the Northern Lights and Aurora side of things. So first up, what is the Northern Lights? The Northern Lights is basically the sun's solar flares interacting with the Earth's magnetic field, and it creates this beautiful green and pink and purple light show that can happen in the sky. Now, it doesn't always turn out like that. There's a lot of things that have to line up in order for it to happen, and if you want to see everything that we did in order to search for the Northern Lights, you can check out the video down below. We go super in depth on how to take photos with your phone and your camera, how to chase them, all of the apps. We're going to list quite a few here, but if you want to go even more in detail and see how we saw the Northern Lights 12 out of the 16 days that we were out in Lapland, then I would definitely recommend checking out that video. So what are the chances that you actually see the Northern Lights? Because the first time that we went, we saw them 0 out of 7 times, and this time we saw them 12 out of 16 times. So what was the big differences? Well, we're going to narrow it down to a couple things. First up is cloud coverage. There needs to be no clouds in order for you to see the Northern Lights, which is why we recommend going in March or September, because you have a much higher likelihood of having great weather compared to going in the middle of winter. The second thing that you need is a good KP index. Now, if you guys are above the Arctic Circle, you guys can actually see the Northern Lights with just a KP of 1 to 2. It is going to be visible, and basically the KP scale is going to tell you how strong and how fast the aurora is moving. It's on a scale from 0 to 9, 9 being extremely high. If it's a KP 9, we should be able to see it down here in the US compared to seeing it all the way up in Finnish Lapland. Now, if it is like maybe a 3 or 4 is where you're going to start to see the beautiful pinks and purples pushing into KP5, and it changes every 15 to 20 minutes. It moves very, very quickly, so you need to be able to act fast. So we definitely recommend downloading a couple apps that we'll talk about in just 1 minute. Just remember though, the KP index is how strong the aurora is going to be. If it's at a KP 0, even if you are in the Arctic Circle, you won't be able to see it. The next thing is solar wind data. So this is basically just tracking how active the sun is. So when you're looking at a scale, as soon as the solar wind starts to tear a little bit more north or above the line is when you are not going to be able to see the aurora. But as soon as you start to get a negative solar wind and you start to see it drop below that line on all of the apps, that's when you're going to be able to see the aurora very clearly, and it's going to determine how quickly it moves in the sky. The next thing that you're going to have to think about is light pollution. If you guys are directly next to a city like Rovaniemi, for instance, it might be a little bit more difficult to see the aurora compared to if you're somewhere like Abisko National Park in Sweden. You're way further away from the main cities, so there's a lot less light pollution to make it so you can see the Northern Lights a lot more clear. The best time to see the aurora is between 9 p.m. and 2 a.m. and it does vary. Some days we saw it right at 9 p.m. when it got dark. Other days we had to stay up much later and we were chasing the aurora until around 2 a.m. After that, we haven't seen it be super effective, so we definitely recommend looking for the aurora between the hours of 9 p.m. and 2 a.m. Now, there's 4 apps that we definitely recommend checking out when you are doing your road trip. Number 1 being the Aurora app. The My Aurora app is fantastic because it tells you where it is. It has live cams on the app, and it gives you an hour-by-hour reading of where you should be. So for instance, if we were in Abisko, we could see the live cam in Kiruna and say, oh, we should drive back over there because there's no clouds over there compared to where we were in Abisko. So I would definitely recommend checking out the My Aurora app. Second is Meteo Agent. This one is awesome because it predicts the chance of the aurora per hour and is a lot more accurate. So it gives you a full reading for the next 24 hours and it gives you a really good indication of if it's going to be clear, what the aurora forecast is going to be, how strong it's going to be, is it going to be visible. So we would kind of cross correlate between the My Aurora app and Meteo Agent. Windy is a great app to see if there are no clouds in the area because like I said, that is one of the biggest factors that's going to determine if you're going to be able to see the aurora or not. So we would check My Aurora and Meteo Agent to see how strong the aurora is. And then we would go and check Windy to see which different locations had clouds and which ones did not have clouds. The last one that we're going to recommend is Space Weather Live. And as I was saying earlier, you can track and see the solar wind speeds. So if it is above the line, that means that you're probably not going to see the aurora. But on the Space Weather Live, if it ever drops below and you have a south facing magnetic field, that's when you're going to really start start to see the aurora move faster and it's going to get a lot brighter. So checking out Space Weather Live is a great way to see it in real time, and it's kind of fun. If you're on that app, you can see when it hits Finland and then when it hits Sweden, and you can plan for it if you are in Norway. Doesn't really work the other way around if you're in Finland and you're trying to track it, but it does work really well as you move further to the west. You can track it a little bit easier on Space Weather Live. Now that is everything you need to know before and things that you can do to help you see the northern lights. With that, we're gonna be jumping into the ultimate itinerary going through Finland, Sweden, and Norway. So the first place that we would recommend going is Rovaniemi. It's one of the cheaper places to fly in when you're thinking of Norway, Sweden, and Finland. So we'd highly recommend starting there. And then it also has a lot of fun activities to do. It has Santa Claus Village that you can go and check out directly next to the airport. It also has the Snow Hotel, which we would recommend checking out for a little bit of a day. And it also has a ton of fun areas where you can go dog sledding or snowmobiling. It's just a really exciting environment, and you can definitely see the northern lights just from Rovaniemi. That's where we planned our entire first 7-day trip. And if you want to see more about Rovaniemi, we have a whole top 10 things to do in Rovaniemi YouTube video that we went ahead and linked down below. Next up, we're going to be leaving Rovaniemi and driving all the way to Kiruna. Kiruna and Abisko are two locations that are pretty close to each other. They go hand in hand. They're only about an hour apart. When you're staying in Kiruna, you can actually go and check out the original ice hotel that the Snow Hotel in Rovaniemi took a lot of inspiration from. We have a whole video comparing the two down below. So if you guys are interested in going to the Snow Hotel or the ice hotel, we would highly recommend checking out that video before you go and visit those. When you're in Kiruna, you want to make sure you go snowmobiling. There is so much open area around there. There's a great skiing hill as well, so you can go and check that out. We would also recommend checking out a snowshoe tour in Abisko National Park. Abisko National Park has this beautiful lake surrounded by stunning mountains, and it has a lot less light pollution than Kiruna does. So if you're chasing the northern lights, we would definitely recommend driving to Abisko National Park, spending some time in the national park, seeing all the beautiful water or frozen waterfalls during this time, and going to the lake. The lake is where we saw the best northern lights because there's no trees and no mountains obscuring your view. So spending some time there during the evening and finding a good pier to just relax, take in the northern lights is a great way to spend your evening.
So once you spend a couple of days in Abisko and Kiruna, you're gonna head on into Norway. And this is a bit of a mob kind of day driving down to Lofoten Islands, but it is gonna be one of the most beautiful drives you will ever do in your entire life. Like, it felt so magical, and these mountains are literally insane. The coolest mountains I've ever seen. And that used to go to the Swiss Alps for us. And so Norway definitely took the cake, especially during the wintertime. It's just so magical. So once you drive into Lofoten, you're gonna start driving down. So you're gonna start at the top, and it takes about 4 to 5 hours to get all the way down to or Rain, depending on where you wanna stay. We decided to stay in Rain the first 2 nights, and then we switched over to Ballstad at the Hotvika Lodge afterwards. We loved both locations for different reasons. We stayed in Rain so we could do the iconic Rainbriggen hike, but if you guys missed it in our last Lofoten video, we wouldn't actually recommend doing that in the wintertime because it is extremely dangerous. So we would recommend staying in that area for some other hikes like Mannen or Reiten. Those were some incredible views with a lot less sketchiness. And then we would also recommend staying in Ballstad for some of the other beautiful beaches and the ability to go kayaking out of Ballstad into the little islands outside of there. And it was just gorgeous. So we definitely would recommend spending the majority of this itinerary in the Lofoten Islands because there is so much to do outside of Aurora hunting. We've actually gotten a few questions about this in the past. So like, if you've gone out there, you've done the snowmobiling, you've done the dog sledding with huskies, you've done snowshoeing, etc., and you want some other things to do that aren't just like winter related activities like that, then Lofoten's gonna have a lot more opportunities for outdoor activities during the winter time. While you're in the Lofoten Islands, we actually did a whole video last week on everything that we'd recommend doing there. So that has all the in-depth ones, but for a little quick TLDR, make sure you check out some of the fishermen's villages horses and the roorboos. They're absolutely adorable, especially in like Sakrasoy and rain. You can also go over to Hamnoy to go check out the iconic Hamnoy Bridge overlooking this gorgeous fjord with these mountain peaks in the background. It is a stunning photo, one of the most photogenic areas I think I've ever been to. And make sure to stop and try some of the local food there. It's such fresh fish and it's very, very good. Once you're all finished up in Lofoten for the couple of days, we stayed there, I believe 5 days, and then we headed up to Tromsø and the Lyngen Alps. We didn't really spend too much time in Tromsø proper besides going to the gas station. So if you want to go explore the city, you'll add an extra day in here. But we decided to go an hour away in the Lyngen Alps up to the Lyngen North resort area, and we loved our time here. The light pollution, there was like none because you're farther away from the city. And so you get prime northern lights here. We saw an amazing northern lights show both nights that we stayed at Lyngen North, and it was incredible. There's a lot of outdoor backcountry snow activities that you can do up here too, especially if you're a backcountry skier, but they do also have a variety of activities that you could book through the hotel as well. Once you spend 2 to 3 days in the Tromsø and Lyngen Alps region, you're going to be heading on up to the northernmost part of Norway and then right back down into Finland. The next stop in Finland is going to be Avalo, and this was one of our other favorite spots along the road trip route. They had just a lot to do. It felt very similar to Rovaniemi, so if you need to cut out some of the stuff, I would choose either Avalo or Rovaniemi. I wouldn't necessarily say you'd have to do both. They're extremely similar in offerings as well as like the hotel experiences. Both towns have lots of good glass igloos and Aurora hotel options. They both have all the same activities. So if you're running short on time, I would really choose one or the other. The reason why, if you're looking for better Aurora, I would probably go with Avalo over Rovaniemi is because it is more north, usually out of the clouds more than Rovaniemi, because Rovaniemi has this crazy like weather pattern where it's just like trapped in the clouds sometimes. The first night actually on our road trip, we stayed in Rovaniemi and we ended up driving up to Avalo to go chase the lights because it was clear there, but it's cloudy in Rovaniemi. Just keep that in mind that you'll probably be doing a lot of driving if you are hardcore chasing the lights as well based on the weather and the clouds. When you're in Avalo, we would definitely recommend doing frozen lakeside saunas, going dog sledding, or going snowmobiling. The place that we stayed at, the Aurora Village Avalo, had ice karting, which is really fun. So lots of activities, like I mentioned, to do here as well. And last but not least, you will be heading into Levi, Finland, and the surrounding areas. There are so many glass igloos out here. We stayed at the Arctic Skylight Lodge in this area, which is not technically in Levi. It's a little bit outside of the city, but you can go snowboarding or skiing during the day. There's a ton of really good resorts nearby if you are into any of that. There's also a ton of really good snowshoeing routes as well. Or you can just take it easy and relax in a beautiful glass igloo. That is a totally different experience than any other hotel room. So totally up to you what you want to do, but we would still recommend a night or two in Levi as well. And with that, you're going to take another 1.5 to 2 hour drive back down to Rovaniemi and you have completed your full loop. And that is basically it in terms of the actual itinerary. So I would recommend, if you're doing this full 1 week to 2 week itinerary, depending on what you decide to keep and what you decide to not keep, I would spread out the activities that you do so you're not doing the same things over and over and over again. I would say, like, if you're doing Rovaniemi, like maybe start that one with like a lakeside sauna and a snowmobile or dog sledding, and then for the next spot do a different activity, and the next spot do another activity. Like, don't do the same ones over and over and over again because it's going to lose its spark, I promise. When it comes to all of these different activities in each of the spots, we'd recommend booking them in advance, or like calling your hotel or emailing your hotel and seeing what availability is like. And same thing with the hotels, book them in advance, because especially if you're going in March, that's a prime Northern Lights time, and so they might get a little bit busy. Same thing if you're going in September or October, which is also an amazing time to go and book this trip because it is the shoulder season, which means you will still have better weather and much better odds of it being not super cloudy, so you can go chase the aurora. So if you're planning on doing that, especially this year as it's peak solar activity, we would recommend being on top of it now. And that is it for our ultimate aurora road trip itinerary through Norway, Sweden, and Finland. If you guys enjoyed this video, make sure to give it a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button for more trip planning tips. We love doing these kinds of videos so we can help you spend way less time planning and more time exploring. And we will see you next week with another adventure.